what's the view that we have? We are so excited. I am Cindy Miles. I'm the HMAAC board president. It's been my honor. And just as I was about to meet everyone down at the museum and mix and mingle for events, we went into COVID mode and had to close our buildings, but now we're reopening. We will be using the CDC protocol, so it'll be safe. We'll have social distancing. Everyone will need to wear a mask. But then also, I'm so excited about what our staff did. Even though we had to leave the building and start working from home, our staff shifted and went into mode where we had HMAAC at home and just really worked hard to give us online programming. So for those of you who don't want to venture out, open and come down to the building, go online, and there's still a lot going on there. We have a special guest, Deloria Nelson, Streete, and I'm excited. We are actually in the same club. We're in a special club. So one, we are both graduates of CAU, Clark Atlanta University. We're in a special club because we were at Clark College. For those of you who don't know the history, Clark College and Atlanta University merged about, I think, 32 years ago. And Atlanta University was the graduate school offering master's and PhD. So now for any of you who want a master's and PhD, Clark offers that. And we are what's called the CC graduates. We're also in another special club is we're both homecoming queens. And we actually got to spend some time together. The school had a celebration of the merging of the two schools, and they invited all of the homecoming queens to come. And we were sitting next to each other, and the reason is because we were among the group that were the oldest on the float. We had a long float.
And the most fly.
That is true, that is true. And we looked around, no one was behind us because we were basically the OGs on there, for lack of a better word, right? So, and then I started to follow you, Deloria, on Facebook, and you do your wellness postings, and you come on with encouraging information. And when I saw that you were publishing a book, I thought, I got to get you on for HMAAC. I asked the staff if I could hijack our social media and basically promote your book. I didn't know anything about it, didn't read it, but based on your postings on Facebook, I just felt like whatever she has written in that book, we're going to talk about it. Little did I know, I actually purchased the book, and then I started to read it, and I just felt like it was life-changing. This interview became less about you promoting your book and more about people learning about who you are, learning about your journey. And I just think God's timing is that this is the perfect time for it, because I feel like everything about your book and your journey, most people right now can relate to for various reasons. We're in the middle of a pandemic, of course. Our economy is in somewhat of a free fall. Many people, because of both of those, are in, having challenges in their relationships. We have also, you're a mother of young adult men. I have in my family a son and also a nephew in my immediate family. And then I'm auntie to so many young men. And our hearts are heavy with what's going on around our country. So because of your journey, I thought that this would be a good opportunity to have you talk about what you've been through, because you're adaptable. I wrote down, you're adaptable and you're optimistic, but then you're also a realist. And I just thought that there's so many lessons that you can share. And I'll tell you, I highlighted your book. So periodically you're gonna see me look over here and look for my highlights, because as I was reading through, I'm highlighting, I got to quote down, I have to, remember that. And I hope that people will be encouraged as I am to do the same thing. So let's start with how you, started writing the book. What
Sure.
gave you the inspiration to write the book?
Absolutely. The inspiration is to authentically share and encourage others. So, the reality is life happens, right? So like you said, we were the queens, and, we had this picket fence of thought about what life would be, but as you start living life, I remember old people used to say, keep living. And what that means is things are going to happen. They're going to change. The trajectory or what you thought was going to happen may not happen. Life has lots of seasons. Some are really good seasons, but some are really dark seasons. And I had a pretty dark season, but I just always knew. I mean, I know a lot of it is based on my faith, but as dark as it was, I still had joy and knew that I would come through. And so as I was maneuvering the challenges of in my life, especially at the time I was a single mom, a son with special needs, salary went from 6-figure to, what am I going to do? But I just kept the faith, I kept pushing, and I really wrote the book as a guide because although it has some inspiration, because I always seek to encourage, it also has some practical guides and tips, and to your point, could be very apropos right now because a lot of people are struggling with finances. What do I do next? What do I do first? And I just wanted to share authentically, this is my story. I survived it. So can you.
And when I talked to you, you said you actually started writing in 2008.
Absolutely. Like right after I got finished, I had to exhale a while. I started writing it. And I was, I'd start, I'd put it down, I'd start, I'd put it down. And I was almost finished the transcript and just life happened. I got busy, I got distracted, and I kind of put it away. And then I would say about 6 to 8 months ago, it just started kind of talking to me. I mean, I really believe in divine order. And one thing I always encourage people, especially women, listen to that inner voice. It has a lot of power. So the inner voice kept saying, pick that book up and kind of start working on it. Now, this is pre-COVID, so I had no idea. So I started working on it, got it edited, and just about had it right, set it down again. And then it was in March, and I just sat straight up in my bed, and the Spirit was like, now is the time. And so it's, I believe in divine order. So I didn't beat myself up and say, oh, you procrastinator. I just was thanking God that he found the season where the book could really help people the most. And so here I am, and I'm getting lots of really good responses, and a lot of people are saying it's helping them, and truly that's my goal.
And that was, I really liked when we were talking about it, and you said, you started writing it in 2008, and I thought that this would be a great opportunity for people to be encouraged. So many women, we start on things, and then we have family and work, and you kind of put those dreams on hold. And I wanted people to be inspired by seeing you. I'm sure there are many women out there that they have that book in the drawer and they have those notes. And Absolutely. After so much time goes by, I think they often feel like it'll never happen. And I think part of your story is the example is that it's never too late. It's in God's timing, because Amen. What you have in this book are all of the types of, all of the information that we need in this moment. And that's another part of the story as well. I liked that, let me see, some of your chapter names, Prepare for War, Chaos, and Disappointment. So talk to us about, what were some of your challenges that you use that word war?
Sure. I mean, sometimes we war at work, right? If we tell ourselves the truth, a lot of what's going on right now relative to the police brutality is also what happens in diversity and inclusion. And those of us who have worked in corporate America or anywhere, we know that equity does not always exist. So some of the war for me was, the initial war was finding the job I wanted. And I talked about that a little bit in the beginning of the book. Finished with my master's degree, was looking forward to an office with a view, and what I actually had was Kroger back room, right? But one of my lessons I said is do what you have to do until you can do what you want to do. And so that was a disappointment, but I learned so much from it and really learned interpersonal skills. I got to do lots of things that nobody in the store wanted to do. And it really opened my mind and my heart. So once I moved up in HR and I was on the person at the panel, when people would go, why did they take a job at Kroger, or why did they take that job? I was the voice of reason saying, everybody's not a trust fund baby, right? Some people have bills to pay and they have to take a job. And so once again, what I find in my life, if I look back, I see how God has prepared me, because there were lots of rooms that I was in and the conversation was, I don't know why that person with this degree did that. And I could jump in and add some light to the situation and actually help them to see the person for their potential, not for a temporary job they may have taken.
So say that quote again.
Do what you have to do.
Do what you have to do.
Yeah, and so you can do what you want to do.
So you can do what you want to do.
Yeah,
And,
I mean, it's just certain things you have to do. I had to work. I needed to get experience. I worked at Kroger, like I said. It wasn't on my top 10 of anything, but I learned a lot while I was there. I learned about myself. I got a lot of HR experience, and before you know it, all that HR experience became real. And in about a year, I was able to get my first job right into human resources. So it wasn't wasted time. There were lessons I needed to learn.
And what I liked when I read about it was during that time, you had a great attitude. You developed positive relationships. And that goes a long way towards how you feel about yourself and how you interact with others. And I think that that's important as well, that even during that time, if you're not where you know you want to be, attitude makes a huge difference.
Oh, absolutely. And you just never know who you meet, the lessons you're going to learn. Once again, I really do believe in divine order. So I don't believe anything is a mistake. There is something that we can learn where we are. And if we have that attitude, we really can learn and grow from any situation.
So in that first chapter, all these things happen, right? That was, you got fired, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And then you, what were some of the other things that occurred?
I got laid off. First I got laid off, and I was like, okay, that's all right. I have a great resume. I'll get another job. I get another job, and then I get fired. It was crazy. I was in probationary period. It's a whole long story, but I'm glad because I had courage and I spoke out about some things that were wrong. They probably thought I was a little bolder than I should have been, having not been at the company that long, but I'm built for that. I feel like I'm built for battle. And I've always said I may kick down doors that I never walked through, but my little sisters or other people are going to walk through them. So I spoke up about something that was ridiculous. They didn't like it. I got fired. So I'm like, And, you know, it was tough because at the time I was a single mom of my older son had seizure disorder and he had bipolar disorder. And it was just tough. And I was overwhelmed with the thought of being a single mom. It wasn't a role that I had auditioned for, so to speak. And I just was like, I think I was in shock for probably a few days. And then I was like, I need to shake it off and figure out kind of how to put things back together. And the thing that made it so hard was if it had just been a termination during any time, it wouldn't have mattered. But because it happened like in 2008 and the recession was happening, everybody was getting laid off. So it was similar to how it is now. There weren't a lot of jobs. Had it been a booming economy and it happened, I wouldn't have worried about it because, I mean, I do have a good resume. I would have been able to just get another job, but all of a sudden, it wasn't just me. It was me and millions of other people, which in some cases I found it comforting because I wasn't alone, but it was tough.
Which is why I thought, again, the timing of the book now, this is what so many people are going through at this time. And then this was also post-divorce where you were, had been post-divorce as well. So
yep, definitely post-divorce and just like, but I don't know. You know that there's a scripture that says the joy of the Lord is my strength. I had so much joy even through the crazy that if you didn't know what I was going through, you probably wouldn't have believed it. So there was just something in me. I mean, it was God just encouraging me. And I just kind of felt like, let's make lemons into lemonade. I mean, one of the funniest things I remember is I got to go on a lot of field trips with my kids, which I hadn't been able to do before because I was in corporate America and always busy. I don't know if the kids noticed anything other than mom is more available, right? So to them, it was gravy. They just thought, yeah, mom is around. She's going on the field trip. She's chaperoning. I remember I got to go to SeaWorld. And so I was more available.
So then now this happens. So you started off in a corporate job, you're married, right? Then laid off, but then also you come, and the reason was because you were speaking up for yourself right?
Okay, yeah.
And then that happens. Now you're have an opportunity to spend more time with the children.
Yeah.
Turns out to be a blessing in that way. And then,
It was.
so then what was your next pivot after that?
Well, what I had to try to figure out in all transparency is how am I going to get some of these bills paid, right? So I was trying to figure out, it's kind of like a chess game as far as what you apply for first. So the first thing I thought was, okay, my older son has disability, so I can get Social Security disability for him, which I couldn't get before because it's income-based. So I went down and applied for that. I was like, okay. Then I applied for unemployment. You know, it wasn't much because in Florida, they should be embarrassed. $275 a week, right? That's all it was and still is. And so I applied for that. And then I'm just kind of moving stuff around. I had a little bit of money in my 401k, but I'll tell you about another blessing and how if we just are obedient, God transforms things. So, you know, people say, girl, you should get food stamps. You said, I'm kind of like, nah, I don't think I need food stamps. I don't really want to take it away from somebody else, you know, so I didn't get it for a long time. Well, simultaneously, my youngest son was in this private AME school, which is kind of like a elementary HBCU. I mean, he loved it. But, of course, it was private, and tuition was getting tighter and tighter. They were working with me. And so one of the administrators said, you know, they have a step-up scholarship that you could maybe apply for. So she said, go down to the office and apply. And I was like, ooh. So right around that time, I said, you know what, I think I'm going to go ahead and apply for food stamps. And let me just say this, because I teach a lot of bias and inclusion. Be careful of the language people put on things to make us not comfortable getting what we need. And I say that to say, when people say food stamps, so many of us get this image of someone with 10 kids who doesn't want to do anything and is just living off the system. And that's so untrue and it's so unfair, because if you think about food stamps and you think about corporate bailouts and you think about the stimulus that was just passed, nobody was embarrassed about getting that stimulus. And if you think about food stamps, it is a microcosm of the amounts of money that the government gives to farmers and business people all the time. So I'm just saying we need to not get caught up with the language. And I probably was a teeny bit. I won't lie. I was kind of like, oh, do I need? But I went ahead and applied, and I had food stamps. So fast forward. I go to the office to apply for the scholarship. And, of course, they want your W-2s from the previous year. So the lady looks at my paperwork, and she goes, ma'am, you don't qualify. And I was like, ma'am, you made too much money. I said, I get that. I said, but things have changed, and I'm not making the income now that I was making then. Is there any exception? She said, the only way you would get it is if you got some kind of food stamps or some kind of, and I was like, oh, I got food stamps. And when I said that, I was approved for the scholarship so I could keep my son in the private school. So once again, because I didn't let pride get the best of me and I applied for food stamps, that was the blessing that I needed so I could continue the stability for my son. So once again, I didn't know that, but I was obedient, applied, and then that was the blessing. So it was amazing. I was like, okay. I was proud then because that's how I got, you know, my son to be able to stay at St. Mark AME School. If anybody's from Orlando, it is amazing. Mm-hmm. And he's an honor student today. But that
I saw that National Honor Society debate team.
Yeah. Oh,
right?
yeah. He's number 35 out of 505 students. He's going to be a senior. So he's in the top 10%.
Amazing. Yeah. Amazing. And then you also had to get support for your other son as well, who had seizures. And I saw how you also had to build a village for yourself, you know, in terms of help with him. So, you know, talk a little bit about what that was.
And I will tell you, people say I'm an underreactor, but I think God knew the stuff I would go through. So he had seizure disorder. And the first time he had a seizure, he was 3 and I was actually in Louisiana. I was in Opelousas, Louisiana, visiting a girlfriend, but divine order. Because I was there in a bedroom in a twin bed next to my son, I heard him having a seizure. Had I been home at the time, we lived in Macon, Georgia, their bedrooms were upstairs. Had that happened then, he may not have made it, but because we were in the same room. So once again, God always sets provisions. So he had seizure disorder. It was, you know, it was hard because you didn't know what was going to happen and when he was going to have them. And a couple of times by myself in the middle of the night, he had grand mal seizures, had to call the paramedics, but I had a really good friend named Joyce. She read the book the other day. She's like, oh, I'm in the book. Honey, it could be 1 o'clock in the morning. He sees and I'm calling the ambulance with one hand, calling her with the other. And it happened twice in the middle of the night. She came, sat with my other kids, went to the hospital with him, got back home, woke up. They didn't know any interruption had happened, which was nice because I felt like it was traumatic enough for me to see it, but they didn't have to. And so once again, it's building that village. She was there and they had no idea. I mean, that was tough stuff. I mean, it was so bad one time. I had an out-of-body experience. I saw myself fainting next to him, and then it was like, girl, then who's going to call 911? Suck it up and shake it off. And that's what I did, but it was tough. It was really tough.
And then did I see in your book that you trained some of your friends on how to deal with him?
Yeah, I did.
Because I think sometimes, people often just keep that and hold that to themselves instead of, bringing other people in to help.
No, I had to, because first of all, I had to teach them how to recognize seizures, because he had a lot of partial complex seizures, and partial complex seizures aren't grand mal seizures. So you really don't know it's happening, and it's not the seizure itself that's dangerous, it's what he's doing when the seizure happens. So with a partial complex seizure, sometimes he would just talk and what he said made no sense, or he would look confused, and people wouldn't really know what it was. So I had to teach them how to recognize that. Also, he had a surgery, and he had something called a vagal nerve stimulator. And there was like a little magnet thing that you could put on his chest to kind of help him get out of the seizure quicker. So yeah, I trained all my friends, and it made them more comfortable keeping him as well as it made me more comfortable. So yeah, no, you need a village, and I had that village. And the Bible says pride cometh before the fall. And I tell you, what I've learned is the more authentic you are, the more power you take away from other people, and the freer you feel because you're not trying to hide anything. So being authentic has worked for me. I even named my business Authentic Culture and Engagement Solutions. And I've just found that just being straight up, real, asking for help, that's how you get blessed.
One of the other that you write about is post-divorce, you ended up in an abusive relationship.
I said need mixed with what is
I have it highlighted. Let's see. Need masked as love and vulnerability are a toxic cocktail, right?
Woo, girl, say that again. Say that one more time.
Your words, need masked as love and vulnerability are a toxic cocktail.
Absolutely, because I was so overwhelmed. I mean, this is not the kind of person I would have ever dated. But I literally remember and feeling so overwhelmed that I just, here was sanity, and my toe was
overwhelmed because of all that was going on in your life?
Yeah, all that was going on in my life, the divorce, and then my son being sick. From one minute he's having seizures, the next minute he's having bipolar rages. He had tried a few times to jump out the car while it was moving. I literally would have to put the childproof locks on. It was just a lot. And so, here comes Mr. I have big shoulders, I can help you out, blah, blah, blah. Child, let me do this.
Come on.
It was a hot mess. I mean, he was just very manipulative, very controlling. I literally got an injunction when my son was 3 or 4 months old, because he just kept threatening me.
But he started off as Prince Charming.
Oh yeah. Make my bath water, give me flowers. Yeah. Oh, just Mr. Prince Charming, but turned out to be like a monster. But the good thing about it is I learned a lot. I share a lot. The biggest blessing, of course, was my son. So that's my youngest son's father. And then fast forward, I'll just kind of do the Cliff Notes version of shoot. I mean, I had to forgive him, right? Which was hard. And he was so toxic in just his words. And it was just a hot mess for a long time, actually. It's a longer story, but we'll get to the good part. But I remember my grandmother used to say, it's better to have a millstone tied around your neck and be dropped to the depths of the ocean than to mess with one of God's children. I used to say, Nana, where'd you get that from? I found out it was scriptural. I will tell you, about 6 years ago, my son's father had a massive stroke. And when he had that massive stroke, it took his tongue. He couldn't speak. And I was like, oh, wow. Because his tongue was so lethal. He was really more verbally abusive than physical, but that lethal tongue, I had never heard some of the stuff that he said to me. I remember one time I was like, am I watching a baby boy movie? What is going on? It was crazy. But I had to forgive him, and I did. I forgave him because I needed my son to know he was loved. And he had kind of calmed down to the point that he would at least call and say, hey, son, how you doing? I love you. So, I mean, it was tough. But, you know, hurt people hurt people. Right. How do you know how to love when you don't have any? Now, I'm not saying stay in it, because I didn't. I ran like Forrest Gump. But I was able to forgive.
Can you stop there and say, for anyone that's possibly in that situation, how did you, when did you come to the realization that you had to leave? And then how did you leave?
Well, I kind of knew. So I'm a journaler. So I think my writing is connected with my soul and the truth. So initially, when there would be an outburst or two, I would say, well, okay, maybe he just had a bad day. But it just kept happening. And then I started realizing, okay, this is not for me. He literally threatened my life the night I was going into the hospital to have my son. I'm like, who does that? So, I mean, it was bad, and I knew it. And I just kind of tried to figure out how to do it in a way that was less a catastrophe, because there are a lot of studies that say a lot of times women, unfortunately, get killed when they're trying to leave. Right. So I just was pretty slow and methodical about it. Also, in full transparency, I was in a better economic situation, so I wasn't depending on him for anything, because this was prior to me being laid off. So it made it a little easier, but it was still tricky. But one of the things I remember I shared with you about visualization, I think somebody texted in, so I don't know if you want to take questions kind of while we're doing it. But I remember I literally, because he would threaten me so much, I remembered seeing my house on the news and crime scene tape around my house, and my neighbors going, oh my God, it's such a shame. Deloria was such a nice young lady, right? I'm like, shoot. And something said, no, this is not how it's going to end. And so some of it is psychology, mind over matter, because abusers are very manipulative, and he played lots of games. Eventually, I figured out how they are, and I don't want to spend all our time on it, but I just remember one thing he would always do. He would say, I need you to bring my son over here on your way to work. Well, what I realized is he just wanted control. He really didn't want to see him. He wanted me to say no so he could yell and scream and holler. So after once or twice, I'm pretty quick, I figured it out. So sometimes I would already be at work, and my son would always be at daycare, and he would say, are you going to bring the boy to me? I'm like, oh, yeah, okay, I'll be there in 15 minutes. And that would be like countdown, 10, 9, 8, 7, phone ring. Oh, somebody was smoking in the house or something happened. I'm not going to be able to get him today. So once I really stayed 3 steps ahead, I realized how it was.
Recognized the pattern, and then knew how to
recognize the pattern and learn how to keep the conflict down. But if anybody's in that situation, you are so worthy, so beautiful, and you are not your mistakes. And I think that's the thing that's interesting, because somebody said to me, and she wasn't trying to be critical, she just said, Dee, I can't believe that. You seem so strong. And I just kind of laughed, because it really doesn't have anything to do with strength. Just sometimes things happen, you're in need, and you look up and you're like, how in the hell did I get here? So it can happen to anybody, but we also can be victorious and learn some very powerful lessons through that.
Which is why when I read that, another reason why I thought you would be a great guest on here to be able to talk about that, because you certainly have, a story that comes out on the other side in positive ways in every area. Let's see. Yeah. I know somebody did submit a chat. Let's see. As a rising sophomore in college.
You know you need your glasses, girl. I got mine on.
Okay. As a rising sophomore in college, tackling many of these issues that you are discussing, I'm so glad that I tuned in this afternoon. Your words of wisdom are beyond helpful, and you are so inspiring.
Oh, see, that makes me smile, because that's what it's about, right?
Definitely.
Go ahead, little sister. You can do it. Come on, you can do it.
So let's say that was chapter 3, and that was need masked as love and vulnerability are a toxic cocktail, right?
Yes, so yes. Run like Forrest Gump. If you don't have yourself together and you're too needy, I think predators can smell need 20 feet away. And so when you're in need of repair, do not look outside for a savior. Look to God, look to yourself, and get healthy, because the person that can smell that, they can slither their way in, and it's really just going to be a hot mess. I can testify. And this is Gatorade, by the way. It's 4 o'clock somewhere, but it's Gatorade.
So relationship-wise, we went from marriage, and then an abusive relationship, and then now, tell us about all that's going on now.
Yeah, so I kind of got through that, and I had met somebody like right before I got fired. And he seemed like a nice guy, but I was kind of like, because let's say this. When you kiss a frog, you don't want to kiss no more for a long time. So I was kind of like, but it was a nice guy. It's so funny. It's so not romantic. How people come up with all these stories, and I looked into his eyes, and I knew, no. I was at the Dollar Tree, and this guy comes up to me and says, "You are a beautiful black woman," in this Caribbean accent. And I was like, And then he was like, "Can I get your number?" And I said, "No, but you can give me yours." And he said, "My name is King, and here's my number." Now, I don't know why I kept his number, because I'll be honest, when I meet people like that, most of the time, I pretend like I'm keeping their number, but I don't keep their number. So I actually kept his number. It was like a holiday, some holiday in May. And I thought, okay, whatever. And I didn't call or anything. Life was busy, but things were starting to get better for me as far as the kids. I mean, was I laid off? I wasn't quite laid off yet. But anyway, I remember being Father's Day, and I said, oh, you know what? I was just going through my phone. The kids were swimming in the pool, and I threw my phone just telling guys, Happy Father's Day. And I saw his name. I said, oh, he looks like he could be a father. And I called and I said, Happy Father's Day. And he was so excited. I mean, if you've ever heard anybody excited, he was like, I did not think you were going to call me. And I was like, oh. So we started talking and dating, and the wheels fell off of both of our careers kind of simultaneously. But it made the relationship so real and authentic, because it wasn't about what we had. It was about what we were trying to build together.
Right.
And, our dates, we'd sit on a picnic table, have some cheese, some grapes, and some pretty cheap wine. And it just, it worked. Somebody said the story was pretty romantic. I think somebody just chimed in. So, okay, well, I'm glad I made it seem romantic. It didn't seem very romantic at the time, but thank you.
And when I was reading in your book, I thought that was, I think you had this line about how you found joy in simplicity. And I thought, that just is so important, because, the bells and whistles and shiny objects can, mask, what's not authentic. And by you just focusing on the simplicity and just the two of you, allowed you to really find love as you were. So
it was not all of this fakeness. It was just, hey, this is it. And and I mean, he loved me then. He still loves me, and he is just, I still smile when I think about him. And it'll be 10 years next February. We would have been married. So Woo-hoo.
And to be transparent, I'm recently divorced. I was married for 22 years, divorced about a year ago. And I'm the ultimate optimist. I love, love, love when there's a story about someone who has gone through challenges and they smile just like you do.
Absolutely. So. Oh, you will. You will. Yeah. I just think going through stuff just makes you so much more real. And also, this is my second marriage. I think being married the second time, you really get it. It's work, right? But if you're willing to do the work, you know what I mean? You can make it work. So it's work, but we're willing to do the work. And we have fun. I mean, one of the things he does is he makes me laugh. Sometimes he's so hilarious that it annoys me. But I know, like, when I get older, I can just see us laughing and joking. And once again, we don't have to have stuff because we loved each other without it. So whatever we have now is just an addition to. But it's not the foundation. Our foundation is not stuff. It's simplicity and love.
Another thing about your book, so when you talk about your career, you just sort of you're, I would say, maybe the queen of adaptability and pivoting, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so one of the reasons I wanted you to talk today is, given that we're in this pandemic, we're in this situation with our economy, people have been laid off on their job, and, you've been able to land on your feet in different ways. One, when you were laid off before, but then also now you were telling me how there's some other opportunities that have come up. Well, first of all, talk about, you went back into corporate America, correct?
I did. So one of the things I will say is there are opportunities to do what you love, and when you have those opportunities, do it. You can do it part-time, but one of the things I would say, and this is definitely apropos right now, if you have been laid off, find out what you want to do and start a business, right? It could be, I don't know, it could be catering, it could be consulting. Start a business. In Florida, it's somebiz.org. And the reason that's so important is it will give you something to do that you love, but it will also mind the gap, right? I think Lena is on here. Lena of
meaning on your resume.
Now.
The gap in your
the gap on your
close
resume.
the gap
Right.
in your resume. Right, Ross.
Yeah, she's a recruiter. She's on the call. And recruiters hate gaps. And it doesn't really matter what the reason is. And so when I started PATH, which was my first consulting business of, Passion, Alignment, Talent, and Heart. That was my acronym for PATH. I did it for like 2 years. Now, let me just be truly transparent, because when I talk about authentic, I am. I may have had one client, right? So it really wasn't like I was busting things out, but it covered my gap. And what was so fascinating when I decided to go back into corporate America, nobody really asked me too much about that period of time because I had a lot of other experience before it. So I would say if you have an opportunity, figure out a way to cover up your gap. Now, just because you have a business doesn't mean you have to incorporate it. You can just have a business without incorporating it. But think about something you want to do, spend a little time doing it, but mind the gap. Make sure you don't have a gap on your resume, because even though people should get it, they don't. It's easier to, another little trick I will share is if you get laid off and it hasn't been more than 6 months, just leave the job on there, right? Because people will call you for interviews more when you're employed than when you aren't, right? Now, don't falsify anything, just leave it on there. And then when you get the call, you can say, oh, by the way, I left, I just haven't updated my resume, okay? So that's a free tip from the career coach of, yeah, I mean, it's not falsification, just keep it on there because you're gonna get pulled more.
Lana says, totally true, D, and yes, we do not like gaps. They just simply don't tell your story, right?
Yep, that's my recruiter friend. Hey.
and it leaves room for a negative impression. And then you said, hey, shout out to Yesenia, my coworker. She says, great tip.
Yeah, it's true. I tell people all the time. Now, don't get crazy with it. Don't let it be 2 years. But I'm saying if you've been laid off, I think you probably have up to 6 months to just act like you forgot to take it off. And then when you actually have your conversation or you need to do the actual application, you can put it on there. But what you're trying to do is get in front of people so you can get that interview. So just leave it on there.
All right, let's see. I'm trying to just look through some. I have so many, like I said, highlights. PATH, let's go back to PATH. That was your acronym, right? Passion, Alignment, Talent, and Heart. So tell us about that.
Well, I think so many people get off path, and you get off path because you're following someone else's dream or someone else's advice. And I think our friends and family are very well-meaning when they say, girl, you should do this, girl, you should do that, you should do this and that. But they're giving you guidance based on their path, right? And it's not yours. So path requires a lot of introspection. I have the butterfly. I love butterflies because butterflies aren't born, right? They're ugly little moths. But when they spend that quiet time in introspection by themselves, they become born to their own beauty. So get some time by yourself and think about what you're passionate about, what makes you excited. And that's what you need to focus on, right? And you align that with your talent and you put your heart in it and you'll find where you need to be. I don't think we're designed to keep hitting our head up against the same wall and thinking the wall is going to move. You're off path, right? Now, I'm not saying it may not be hard because there's going to be some struggles. We talked about seasons and I've had some struggles. But when you're on path, you know it. Okay. And listen to, what about all the girlfriends that give you advice and they never take their own advice? Okay. So I'm just saying, you know, people can give you advice and it can be well-meaning, but you need to go internally to say, is this the path for me and does that feel right? So sometimes you just got to tune them out. You can act like you getting the text. Oh, I'm getting the text. I need to call you back. because you really do have to mind your environment seriously. And people that want to take your negative energy and always spewing all this negativity, I don't think you need to have time for them, but especially not when you're going through a transition. During a transition, you need supporters and cheerleaders when you're going through a transition, because it's hard enough to shift without everybody telling you why you shouldn't be doing what you're trying to do.
All right, so the next chapter, let's see, I have another quote. Love this one, Life Lesson 7. I can endure anything that has an expiration date.
Come on, somebody. It's true, right?
I can endure anything that has an expiration date. So explain what you mean by that.
Yeah, so life has seasons. And I've had this conversation often with people sitting in my office, and they're like, I want to do this and I want to do that, and I don't want to be complacent and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, slow down a little bit, right? Because the Bible speaks of contentment, right? There's a scripture that talks about whether in planting or whether in harvesting, the key is to be content. So let me say this, and I really want everybody to hear this. Contentment is not complacency, right? Contentment is not complacency. Contentment is saying, I am thankful and grateful for where I am right now with the lessons that I'm learning, right? We all have seasons. Complacency says, I'm grateful and thankful, and I don't ever have to move. That's different, right? So if you know you're not complacent, be content and start thinking about what else you want to do. But sometimes you can't even enjoy the here and now because you're so busy going to the next step and the next step and the next step. Be content, right? And enjoy and learn the lesson. Some people say bloom where you're planted. But there have been so many times that I learned some things where I was. I knew it wasn't forever, but I can endure anything that has a time limit. And I'll give you an example, and it's in the book. When I decided finally to go back to corporate America, there was a job at a water park, and I was the HR director of the water park, and I was able to open the park and hire everybody and, you know, get the culture going, and it was exciting. Now, realistically, it wasn't where I needed to be financially. But did I love that gig? Oh, my goodness. I loved it. I went with joy, and it was fun. And it's so funny. The other day, the young lady that I actually reported to when I was in that job, she posted something. I think I had done like my Coach D's Corner. And she said, Dee, you know what? You were so much more talented than the job you had. She said, but you did it with such grace and beauty. And I was like, oh, you know, because I did. I loved it. I did it. I knew it wouldn't last forever. I was there about 9 months, and then I got an opportunity to go to the last corporate job I had. And so at that point I moved, but I wasn't slacking. I didn't have an attitude. I was grateful. Remember, this was the person that did not have a job before, right? And had food stamps and a special program for her son. So I was nothing but grateful, and I gave all I could give. But when the time was there, I moved on. But I didn't burn any bridges. I always said I could go back and work there in retirement. The people that were there that are still there, you know, we have a great relationship. So you can endure anything with a timeline, right? And you can set your timeline. It may not be the exact date. Now, I'm not that anal. I'm not that OCD person. But you can just say, hey, you know what? I'm going to stay here and learn, let the market come back, learn everything I can, but I'm going to kind of start looking for something else. But contribute while you're there and be gracious and positive. You don't know what job God has for you there. You may be there to testify to some people, to encourage some people. You know, we're supposed to work as we're working for God, right? And I've always said that. I didn't put this in the book, but I always say that. I know my real reporting relationship, right? You know, every now and then we get a toxic or a crappy boss. That don't faze me, because guess what? I don't really report to them. I report to Big G, right? So because I know my real reporting relationship, I'm working as though I'm working to God. So you're just there for a reason. Maybe it's to teach me how not to lead. But whatever it is, I'm going to learn the lesson and keep it moving, because I know my real reporting relationship. And I want everybody to know who they are. And when you know who you are, some of that stuff doesn't even faze you.
So now, tell us about how you got to the 6 figures. You have about 100 businesses, right?
Look, I know it's like the Jamaicans. How many jobs you got, man? Yes, I do. But so what I did was when I left the water park, I was probably making about 60 or something. And one thing, please, ladies and gentlemen, learn how to negotiate. Negotiations won't turn bad. If they have no more to give, they won't give it to you. But if you leave it on the table and then you find out another coworker is making $10,000 more than you, you're going to have an attitude and be salty. But it's your own fault if you didn't negotiate. So 2 tips I will tell you. One thing I do, I always say P&P. I pray and I prepare, right? I prepare because I don't want to not get an opportunity because of my lack of preparation. I pray, though, because I trust God and his divine order. And he knows 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 3 years from now, is the company going to fold? Is the boss going to be toxic? So when I pray and prepare, if I don't get the opportunity, I'm still rejoicing because I know it wasn't for me. So pray and prepare is something I would say. But negotiate. So even though I had gotten knocked down to 65, and I don't mean that funny. It's not about the numbers, because at this point, anything you make that you're making legally is a blessing, and I rejoice. But I knew that I was worth more. So when they came at me at the job, I knew what the job paid about. So I think I said I made 90. Now, people could say that I wasn't telling the truth. I was worth 90. So once again, my report relates to my report to God. Things are changing a little bit, and I'll share this with you too. They have passed some laws for sure in Boston, in California, in New York City, where they can no longer ask you about your salary. And the reason they passed this law is because women and minorities, if you always are underpaid, you continue being underpaid, because what the practice was in the industry is just to give you a little bit more than where you were, right? So if you're making 65, and they go, I can give you 68. Well, the devil is a lie, because I knew that I was worth more than that. And so I think I got like 90 and had bonuses and stuff. So that's how I jumped back to 6 figures, and was doing that for a while. I got my dream job while I was there. I led the diversity and inclusion department, which is something I have been wanting to do for 25 years. But God just lined it up, and it was so funny. We talk about equity at work. Nobody tapped me on my shoulder and say, Dee, this is your job. God tapped me on my shoulder, and I said, that old song, sometimes you got to encourage yourself. Right. I said, this is my job. And everything kept trying to discourage me, but what God has for you, nobody can take. So it was funny. They were like, first the recruiter tried to tell me that I shouldn't apply. And I had already talked to the hiring VP, and he had assured me I was a candidate. So I was going out of town, and I called her, and I just said, hey, I'm just letting you know I'm going to be out of town. I know you're going to be interviewing. And she was like, well, we're kind of looking for candidates. And I was like, excuse me? And she was like, well, and I was like, wait, is she trying to blow me off about my job? I was like, So I called the VP, and I said, I'm not sure what you told this recruiter, but, and so then she said a few other things. And I said, I think you need to call this person back. His name is Michael. I said, I think you need to call Michael back, because he's assured me that I'm a viable candidate. So she was like, okay. Then the other thing they did is they posted the job in Denver, and I lived in Orlando. I said, the devil is a lie. We're talking about virtual. I can do this job here. I applied anyway. So it was just a series of things that were meant to block me, but you have to be persistent, right? And it was like, no. And I kept pushing and pushing, and I got it. And it was a huge increase, because I hadn't done diversity and inclusion as a role. I was more in employee relations, but I always did diversity and inclusion on the side and helped run all these programs because I loved it. And so to go from like an individual contributor role to running diversity and inclusion for a Fortune 500 financial services firm was like, wow. But that's the kind of blessings God has for us. So once again, dream big, because he is strategic and he can orchestrate things in a way that it'll blow your own mind. And it did. And I was like, wow. And I did it for a couple of years. But, I am adaptable, and I feel like timing is everything. So it came to a point where I felt like it was time to do something different. My husband at the time had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. He's fine in Jesus' name. But I just was like, you know what? I'm ready to do something different. And so I left, and, hey, I'm doing my thing now. I'm coaching. I'm doing diversity and inclusion work. I have a little more time with my son before he goes off to college. And we're figuring it out. It's not easy. My husband just picked up a second job because he's like, babe, I know this is important to you. So we're figuring it out, but that's what you have to do. It's about sacrifice.
And you told me that in the midst of COVID, COVID, but then also with what's going on racially in our country, you now have opportunities. You're getting calls to do diversity training.
It's turning around, right? Because when COVID started, I was like, uh-oh, right? It was like in the back of the book, I said, here she grows again, because I was like, hold on, wait a minute. I just left this job. It was into 18. I'm doing okay. Had some really good speaking assignments, but I was speaking primarily at conferences. You know what happened when COVID happened? all the conferences stopped. I was like,
Right.
uh-oh. And I was getting a little bit discouraged. You know, I was still doing my pray and prepare, and I had an interview, and then they closed the position down because of COVID. But that, you know, they think it was because of COVID. It was because God said, just hold on, I got something for you. And sure enough, now my phone is starting to ring. I have 2 or 3 presentations. I have 2 or 3 coaching clients. So once again, one of the things I will tell you is delay is not denial. And when God promises you something, he brings that to fruition. I mean, I think about my son. He had seizures from 3 to 18, but he always told me he would heal him. So we prayed, the saints prayed, church members, and he's seizure-free now. He had surgery at 18. Before, they couldn't see anything. Every time they did the MRI, they couldn't see anything. And then at 18, when they did the MRI, they finally could see something. So if they could see something, they could operate on it. So he's seizure-free.
Seizure-free.
He's driving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's driving, which, you know, driving for someone that's had seizures, that was huge. That was like a
Right.
Harvard degree. Driving in school and just doing good. So once again, God's promises are real. You just got to trust him and step on out there. You can't say, oh, I think, and you can't tiptoe with the promises. You got to be bold because God has everything. So you got to be bold in going and getting what, you know, God has said is for you.
So what we'll do is, let me just
Oh,
go
man,
back.
it's 8:54 already.
I know.
Yeah, I
It's
think I should be quiet. You think we should
time to go.
entertain questions?
Yeah,
so I'm
let
making
me
sure to
just
be
let people
quiet in case
know.
there's
The
questions.
chapters are Chapter 1, Prepare for War, Chaos and Disappointment. Chapter 2, Assess and Attack. Chapter 3, Reflect and Revitalize. Chapter
Come on.
4, Relaunch, Rebrand. Chapter 5, Recoup.
Recoup.
And Chapter 6, Rejoice but Remain Silent. I'm sorry, Rejoice but Remain Resilient.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
let's see if
recoup
we
is
can.
big. Yeah, there's a song that says, I'm thinking about the promises he gave to me, take back what the devil stole from me. You got to recoup it, right? And you don't go back and say, may I have? Please, you go and get it because it's God's and he'll give it to you tenfold. So you got to recoup everything, but you definitely have to remain resilient because change is around the corner.
And in your Chapter 5, you recoup in your career, recoup in your marriage, recoup in the lives of your children, in
Yes,
finances, in every area.
Yes, all of the above.
Tell me about your way with words. As I was reading through, you know, every chapter has life lessons, and the way that you have them worded could be something that someone picks that for the day or they pick it for the season. And I think the way you word them, you know, would resonate with people. And whenever I talk to you, there are these nuggets that just come out of your mouth, and I'm thinking, I had to write that down. And you said that your friends call them deisms.
Yeah, I just think it's a gift and a blessing. I mean, it's natural to me. They kind of roll off of my tongue, but people do find them profound. And I'll say, when I go back and read them, I'm like, oh, girl, that was, you know, that was kind of dope. So it's just a blessing of, I mean, my undergraduate degree is journalism, and I've always loved writing, even when I was a child. But it is something about the way that things are put together of, I just consider it a blessing. But I have gotten some feedback for it, and sometimes I go back and read, and I'm like, oh, that was a nugget. So, I mean, as long as God is going to put pearls in me, I'm going to open my mouth and speak them out. But I do realize that a lot of times they bless others, and so that's the goal.
So tell me about, you were mentioning your relationship with your ex-husband. You know, we talked earlier about all the challenges of divorce and then the relationship. Sure. And I want everybody to hear, because it was a good news story with you marrying, but then also, you know, you all have come to have this successful blended family.
Absolutely. I have a saying that I call lead with love.
Lead with love?
Really lead with love.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, you know, love builds. Love doesn't tear down. And the reality is we were married for, I think, between 10 and 15 years. I mean, we have 2 children that we had together, 3 actually. And I mean, it's just a blessing. And it's funny because he and my current husband get along.
That's
and,
what
you know,
she
we
said.
laugh. Yeah, it's a girl. That's some white people stuff, right? I'm being silly. But, I mean, when we do family gatherings, he's invited. He comes. The funniest thing, though, is I was going out of town one time, and my ex-husband called and said, hey, Dee, I'm going to be in town. if I don't really want to get a hotel, can I stay with you guys? And I was like, first of all, I'm not going to be here. But secondly, you're going to have to ask King. And he said, okay. So he did, and I'm out of town flying around doing work. And he spent the night, and my husband took him to the airport. And so I just, love really is love. And it was important for the kids to see that we could co-parent. But bigger than that, we really do love each other, right? And I don't see it as a bad thing. I see it as something that builds. So we're all still good friends, when we have, I think Christmas he came over, with his red shirt. And it's nice because the kids get to see their dad. Mm-hmm. A lot of times if I think my husband's like, oh, you need to invite him or whatever. So it's really not that hard. If we think about God's ability to love us throughout all of our mistakes and disappointments, if you really lead with love, a lot of things that people say are complicated, it's really not that complicated. So it's really not hard. It's actually pretty easy. And they've done stuff together. Like, I think we were getting a microwave put in one time, and my husband is good at certain things, but at the electrical part, he wasn't. So they're up there putting it up together, and I was feeling myself for a second. I started taking pictures and say Team D, and I was like, girl, you better stop this foolishness. But, it's just, it's family. Mm-hmm. And you really don't divorce, you get divorced in name, but you really can't divorce the time you had and what you built, right? Now, it may take a little time. I'm not pretending that it's easy, right. But when you lead with love and you practice forgiveness, it does some amazing things, and it really opens up, I think, portals for more blessings for you.
Mm-hmm. And I thought it would be interesting for you to talk about that, because that's just rare, like you say, especially in our community. It's a rare thing. And so people need to hear that. Yeah. Well, we're almost to the end. Let me see if it's anything else that I wanted. So you have 10 children. Oh, yeah. Right. So it's the Black Brady Bunch. I had 4 and my husband had 6. So the Black Brady Bunch. And then 4 granddaughters. We figured it out. We have 2 daughters that are the same age. My youngest son and his youngest daughter are the same age. But, I call them bonus kids because they really are. Right. And, of course, I have really good relationships with them. And, love is love. And so, it just makes it more rich and more interesting. And then you said 4 granddaughters? I do. All girls, girl power, right? Girl power. Girls are amazing. And I think we really have to impart upon our young girls both their beauty and their value. I think I was speaking earlier to someone, and that test that they did with baby dolls years ago with which doll is pretty, which doll is ugly, which doll is good, which doll is bad. They did it probably 30 or 40 years ago, but they did it again recently. And unfortunately, some of the same stereotypes are coming through, because the little beautiful black girls would say, which doll is pretty? They inevitably chose the white doll. Mm-hmm. Which doll is smart? They chose the white doll. Which doll is bad? They chose the black doll. And so parents, we really need to understand the brainwashing, right, whether it's through TV or whatever. And every time we can, we need to build up our daughters' natural beauty, their brilliance, and their value. Because, I thank God my parents did that for me. And so I had really strong self-esteem. But there's so many things now, and it's so physical, materialistic. Who can have the biggest butt, the biggest lips? It's really, it has to be tough. I wouldn't go back. If they said, would I do this wand and you turn 20? I'd be like, no, thank you. I'll stay flying 55, right? It's just too much. But we have to impart love, beauty, and just self-assurance on our little beautiful black and brown babies. That reminds me of a story from when we went to homecoming, at the time that we were there, and we were all on the float. And I haven't forgotten this. So you and I, of course, were sitting beside one another. And just as the float pulled off, and, the whole community's out in the neighborhood, lining the streets, waiting to see the floats come down. And you see the first little girl, and you said, "Hey, Queen." and you started doing the wave, and it just triggered us all to start looking for every little girl in the crowd. And our focus was no longer on riding on the float, but finding every little girl that was there. We're all looking, hey queen, and we're waving, they're waving, and it just warmed my heart. That ended up being other than meeting all the other homecoming queens, that was what warmed my heart the most, and that image
you were reflecting
was
beauty,
so
reflecting
exciting
beauty
to
to them.
me.
Yeah, so they say, oh, I'm a queen. You like people say, help your sister fix your crown. You stand up a little straighter, and that's what we have to do for each other. And of course for the young girls, but even at our age, we just have to affirm our worth and our value and not compete, because it's not about a competition. I've always believed the pie is big enough for everybody to have a slice. And I don't have to diminish anybody for the light to shine on me. Just let's love each other. I mean, the greatest of these is love, and love builds. It uplifts. It doesn't tear down. And so if I can, and I always say love is an action word, right? You can say all this stuff, but what are you doing? So if I can impart anything, it really is to lead with love, and not just when people are being loving to you. Lead with love at all times in all situations. And so that light and that love, man, it makes a difference.
And I was looking forward to going back, hoping that next time we can go back, we could have little queens up there riding with us that, somehow have it where, they're not down there standing and watching, but they're riding with us. So we'll have to
can you
plan
imagine that would be like a dream come true for a lot of them. And so, and they are the future, and they are queens, right? I mean, God didn't make a mistake when he created us. He had the exact right everything when he put our DNA together. And so we have to celebrate that.
See if we're able to maybe take a few questions before we end. I'm going to see if Davinia can maybe turn on everybody's sound. One second. Gallery view. Hey, everybody.
Hello.
Hello. Ask questions of Deloria. Who's got
Hi, everyone. It's Lana DeMary. Hi, Dee. Hi, Cindy. Thanks for hosting. Hi. I just want to say thank you, Dee, because we all do have that pause from time to time. And, we stop amidst everything that's going on and get stagnant in our groove. And this is, I haven't read the book yet. I ordered it yesterday. And I feel like so far from what I'm hearing is just a reminder that, there's so much more in us. And it's okay to push through, even if you're afraid and you're like, oh, my God, I don't know what else I can do. And I love that you just, said so many times tonight that, God's in control. He's the one who's doing it. He's the one who's guiding. Just put it in his hands. Trust, believe, and go. And, tonight, again, has just been so inspirational for me. And I just, truly want to say thank you from my heart. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Our meeting, it was short, but it was so purposeful. So thanks again.
And let me say, the book is an easy read. I literally read it in, I think, one sitting, and then I went back and just started highlighting and highlighting. So just want to encourage everyone to, I just found it inspiring. Anybody else have a question for Deloria while we're on here, or want to make a comment? Somebody may want to share, since we're on here, something.
Hi, Cindy. This is Joyce. I joined in late, but when I chimed in, I was so impressed by the enthusiasm expressed by Dee and the spiritual component that was in her message. And I'm one who believes what God has for me, it is for me. And it's never too late to make a change and a transition. So thank you, ladies, for presenting this dynamic program. I truly enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Hey, Joyce. I see my mom's on here, my sisters, my daughter.
Oh, cool.
Davinia is our COO, so she's another Clark alum as well. So thank you for pulling this together for us. And Dee has 2 books coming out, so we'll make a date to come back on here again, because
I got more books
what
in
you've
me.
got coming
Absolutely.
out.
Absolutely. And I'm also going to be doing a coaching session. So just keep following me on Facebook, because I think right now is a good time to have a coaching group instead of one-on-one, maybe 5 to 10 ladies who want to kind of go through this journey of figuring out what we want to do together. Because I'm kind of, here she grows again. I'm moving and grooving. But once again, you know, I know our pastor said one time, he said, even though this seems like a season that's horrible, some people can be blessed during this season. So I think we should all raise our hands and we can be blessed in the midst of COVID.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter what's going on. God is in control, and he can order our steps in a way that we can be blessed and rejoice in the midst. I always think about the storm shaking and the wind was blowing when he was on the boat, and God was doing what? He was asleep, because he knew he had it. And so that's the kind of peace that I'm beginning to have. I see stuff and I don't worry too much because I know he has it. And so, you know, I'm not special. I'm one of his children, and so are you. So all of the promises and the blessings that he's outlined for us, we need to expect them and go get them.
Thank you.
And then I see Seba's on here. Seba, our CEO. Did you want to say a few words?
Hi, I just want to thank both of you. All the messaging and the advice was very inspirational and so on point. So I really learned a lot, and just those reminders that you sometimes forget when you're kind of going through life. So
Right.
it was
Hello.
very, very inspirational. So just want to thank you.
Sandra, I thought,
Yes.
did you
Hi.
see you're on there?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Cindy, for placing this together. Dee, thank you so much for your inspiring words and your words of encouragement. You just have such a dear voice that's so calming. And it seems like nothing can just blow your way that can upset you. But I tell you, thank you for speaking life to all of us today. I really enjoyed you. I haven't gotten a book, but let me tell you, it is worth getting, and the other ones to follow as well. I'd like to thank both of you all for having this. I really was encouraged today.
Thank you for having us. And shout out to Cindy, who's in the Queens Club with me, for putting it together. It really,
Yay!
you know, it made me feel good. So I was super excited when she called. And I'm like,
Absolutely, absolutely.
And like I said, it just started off as an opportunity to promote your book. But then once I read it, I thought, oh my gosh, this is just, you know, I'm loving this. So yeah.
Yes.
And then so the next one is Affirmations, right? That's the one you said.
Yeah, I got to be set to keep going, build our resilience. I mean, some people put stickers on their mirrors, some people read things, but we have to encourage ourselves and remind ourselves of who we are. And who we are isn't what other people say we are. It's not what other people think about us. It's not our mistakes. It's what God says about us. And when he created us, he said, well done. So, you know, we are here for a reason. We're special, and we just need these affirmations to remind us who we are. And so, yeah, I'm just going to keep doing this thing until I can't do it anymore. And what gives me the most joy is really being able to inspire people. So the fact that you all are inspired, hey, that's enough for me. So my night is made. I'm super excited now.
Anybody else wants to say anything?
Hey,
Oh, there's my dog.
it's Milan, your
Hi,
dog.
Milan.
I just want to say, Mom, I'm proud of you, and I want to thank you and Miss D for the encouraging words that me and Aunt Laura, we sat in here and we listened to it, and so I just wanted to thank you guys for, you know, giving some inspiration, especially being a college student. A lot of the stuff that you guys were talking about was stuff that I was glad that I was a part to listen to, so thank you guys.
All right. Young people listening. Hey, we love that.
Amen.
If I kind of go back through and summarize, we had sort of the summary of your struggles: divorce, abusive relationship. You had one son with seizures and bipolar disorder, laid off during the recession, then lost financial losses during the recession, fired for speaking up for yourself. And then you kind of threw it in as we were talking, oh, my husband had prostate cancer, but he's healed now in Jesus' name. Those are all, you know, the summary of struggles, but the whole point of the book and why I was so excited to have you here is that each one of those could literally be their own book. And, but yet you've taken each one and just, you know, kept it moving with your faith and your attitude and action, all of your deisms to continue to move forward, and then to be a testimony so that in each of those areas, women can look to you, and even, men out there who, I'm sure you have clients who are men as well.
Absolutely.
You have all these life lessons that you can pass on.
I mean, if you think about resistance, right? Resistance is what builds muscle, right? I mean, I'm not a gym rat. I play one on TV. No, I don't. I need to do a little better. But resistance builds. So struggles really do strengthen. I mean, you show me someone that's never been through anything, and I'll show you somebody who is kind of like a limp. I mean, it's going to be tough. And I'm not saying that pain is good, right? I'm not saying that, but it's really, what lesson did you learn? And when people talk about coming out better, not bitter, it's true, because all of these lessons are built for us to be strong and to be prepared for whatever's coming next. Like when I talked about that chapter, prepare for war, chaos, and disappointment. Things are going to come, but if we practice, if we build that muscle, that resistance muscle, when it comes, it doesn't take us out. It's kind of like, oh, okay, next. Now, we talked about it because this is the end, but you got to take the time to heal and self-reflect, and learn the lessons, but it doesn't have to take you out. I'm going to end with a scripture, and I just think it's so powerful. It's in James, and it says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, when you face trials of tribulations of different kinds, because the testing of your faith brings about perseverance. Perseverance must finish its work so that you are complete and not lacking anything." And that's why those tests are there. And it strengthens us, and it prepares us, not just for our own battles, but to help our sisters or brothers with theirs. And so, hey, I'm pretty strong now, right? I got muscles, y'all.
And that's part of what you do with your coaching, Coach D's Corner.
Absolutely.
Is help others to build muscle as well.
Absolutely, yeah. And I would love, I take clients because I just want to see us all win. And I think winning is not as hard as people think, but sometimes you do need a little help, an accountability partner, somebody to help you get through those disempowering beliefs that you can't do it. And that's my job. I mean, and I really am glad now that this is where I've kind of ended up with coaching, because I didn't realize how valuable it was until now. And a lot of us that are maybe struggling, whether it's at work or other things, get a coach. And it doesn't have to be me, but invest in yourself. Get a coach so you can kind of get unstuck and be all that you were designed to be.
All right, Queen.
All righty. Love you, girl.
It's a wrap. Love you too. It's a wrap.
All right. Take care.
Okay.
I will.
Bye.
Bye-bye.